Good afternoon and welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining today, our Authors in Their Journey series featuring Heather Haldeman presenting her book, Kids and Cocktails Don't Mix. We have a lot of people that are joining right now, so we'll just wait till everyone is in and then I'll start the program. So for optimal joining for this program, please put yourself on mute. We actually have the program being recorded to put on YouTube Pasadena Library. There's also closed captioning that you can set up on your computer as well. I will be welcoming and introducing our author, Heather Haldeman. She will be presenting about her wonderful book, and then we will have chat. So you can please put your questions in chat and we will answer the chat questions following the program. So this is the cover of the book, Kids and Cocktails Don't Mix. Heather's book is in the Pasadena Public Library. Heather has very graciously donated the book to the Pasadena Public Library. It's also available for purchase if you want at Vroman's bookstore in Pasadena. So Heather is a Pasadena resident, and we're delighted to have her today. It is her debut memoir, Kids and Cocktails Don't Mix. It's about growing up in wealth and ruin in Los Angeles during the Mad Men era. Perhaps you've seen the TV series, Mad Men. Life is easy and opulent. But when her father abandons the family to chase a wealthy woman, Heather, together with her glamorous mother, Marilyn, and sister, April, must find the grit to keep going forward. And they definitely do, and you'll find that out in the book. Heather is the granddaughter of the 31st governor of California, Goodwin Knight, and his family is also mentioned in the book. I just want to point out that our One City, One Story book is a memoir by Susan Strait in the country of women, and how difficult it is actually to write a memoir. You are personally really exposing yourself and your family. And I think it's very special to be able to read a memoir and get to know a person, also to know the history of that particular time. Heather goes into the history. You get to know that Hancock Park area of Los Angeles, Larchmont Street Boulevard, and the stores that are there. And so you get to know that whole area of Los Angeles and the history of that area in the 60s on, based on the book. So at this time, we're just delighted to be able to welcome Heather to talk about her book and her wonderful memoir. Thank you for joining us today, Heather.
Thank you, Christine. And I just want you to know what an honor it is to be here tonight to speak about an author and his or her journey. And just a side note, I want to do a little shout out to the library. Often, I don't have an office, and I would be writing on a little table in our sunroom and I'd be stuck. And I think, gosh, I got to get out of here. I got to, stop changing the laundry and, watering the plants. I was stuck on some part of my book, and I would go over to our local library, the Linda Vista Library, and I'd sit at a table. I'd bring my laptop and sit at a table, and I'd look around at all the books and think, all these writers were blocked. And so many times I was just inspired and I moved on. So I love the Pasadena Library. I just want to say that. So it's an honor to be here. I'll begin with just letting everyone know that my book, as Christine showed you right here, that's my mother, Marilyn. Kids and Cocktails Don't Mix tells the riches to rags story of my family, particularly of my mother, Marilyn, who worked to hold on to our home at 127 Fremont Place and some semblance of glamour after my father abandoned us. The story is peppered with details some of you might remember: Brill cream, slicker frosted lipstick, and Vandecamp's molasses cookies. And places many of us know: Larchmont Boulevard, where most Hancock Park residents did their errands. My world was populated with people who chain smoked larks or unfiltered Pall Malls, drank vodka rocks or bourbon, and went to places like Perino's, Scandia, and the Bistro, or even the Entree Cafeteria. A soundtrack is Leslie Gore, Herb Alpert and the Tijuana Brass, and Jethro Tull. My sister April and I navigated the chaos after my father's departure. We weathered my mother's marriage to a man with 4 children, along with financial woes. Meanwhile, our 4,500 square foot colonial home in Fremont Place reflected the constant upheaval and neglect we felt. The book started out as an essay I'd written for my writing group. I'd had a fantastic teacher, Bernadette Murphy, who mentored me and gave me the confidence to understand there was some connective tissue there, an overall narrative. It took me 15 years to complete this book. In many ways, the story is about my mother, who my husband Hank says is like a cross between Phyllis Diller and Carol Channing. She really thought she was Marilyn Monroe, or maybe that she was just always meant to be Marilyn Monroe. She's funny and bawdy and kept us laughing. But as I got deeper into writing the book, it became my story, the story of a child surrounded by chaos she can't control, shaped by how perfect things need to look on the outside, and aware that inside nothing is perfect, nothing is right. This is a story for people who grew up children of divorce, or who had families whose finances fell out, or who were chubby kids struggling with their weight. In other words, it's a story for anyone who ever felt like an outsider. It's also a love note to the old Los Angeles of the cocktail era, to my mother, whose grit got us through it, and to an overweight little girl who felt worthless, who ended up not only surviving, but thriving. So I'm just going to bring out a little show and tell. This is a balustrade, and I wanted, before I just begin to read you a brief part of chapter 1 to give you an idea of what the book is about. This is my inspiration. My cousin Jonathan went to our home in Fremont Place just after it was razed, after my mother sold it. And in the pile of debris, he found this balustrade. And when he got home, he called me and said, "Heather, I have something for you." And I ran over there and he said, out of the pile of debris, here it was. And I couldn't believe it. So I ran home, drove home, and I put it on my desk and I wrote an essay. And that's when I took that essay to my writers group, and my mentor and teacher, Bernadette Murphy, said, "No, Heather, this is not an essay. This is a book." All right. Let me begin. Chapter 1, 1964. Damn it, Mom shook her finger, looking at the orange painted fingernail she'd just broken. The manicure was brand new, and now look at it, ruined. Balanced on a step stool, a hammer in one hand, a nail in the other, and a scowl on her face, she was decorating the house for that night's party. She let go of the offending fishnet, which fell to a heap on the back porch. "Your father should be here doing this, not playing golf at the goddamn Wilshire Country Club." "But you love to decorate for parties." I dangled my chubby legs from the patio chair, breathing in the buttery smells coming from the kitchen. Josephine, the caterer, was making cheese puff hors d'oeuvres. 2 men from Abbey Rents lined tiki torches along the perimeter of the landscaping that framed the large pool. When the sun went down, those torches would light up the yard, casting an enchanting glow. The pool lights would be turned on, flowers floating on the surface. "Hand me the net," Mom said, pounding the edge of the netting into the pillar. Dressed in stovepipe capris with a white blouse tied at the waist, she was a fashion plate. "Ma'am, where do you want this?" A man appeared, pushing a thatched-covered cocktail bar on a dolly. Over there, she pointed the broken fingernail to an open area by the pool, front and center where everyone can get to it. Why everything was a Hawaiian theme when we lived in Los Angeles, I never understood, but it was beautiful, enchanted, and dreamlike. Mom stepped down, the hammer next to the top of her slim thighs surveyed the blue glass balls on the ground awaiting their artful arrangement in the net. She waved her arms to take in the magical decor. This is what sets the scene. With Hollywood names like Jack Lemmon and Blake Edwards as clients, my father's law practice was thriving. The money was flowing, and Dad had decided that we should move from our modest home to a more impressive one. I was 8 when we moved to 127 Fremont Place. One of the few gated communities in Los Angeles, Fremont Place was a well-known and sought-after address in Los Angeles. The entrance at the intersection of Rossmore and Wilshire was impressive with large stone gates. The reality, though, wasn't what it seemed. Hank, the security guard, was a retiree who spent most of his time asleep in his dated patrol car. Like much on Fremont Place, the patrol car was just for show. Most of the 73 homes in this private park, mansions really, were over 50 years old, each with its own grand style. The silent film star Mary Pickford had once rented number 56. During our time in Fremont, the musician Lou Rawls, the California Secretary of State Marge Fong Eu, and the world heavyweight boxing champion Muhammad Ali all became our neighbors. Ours was a beautiful white colonial with a center hall floor plan spanning 4,500 square feet. The purchase price in 1963 was $67,000. On another night, a cold winter one, Mom set the scene with a roaring blaze in the fireplace of the spacious living room. Candlesticks of varying sizes held green-ridged candles, color coordinated with the throw pillows on the white sectional. Placed on side tables, the coffee table, and just about every surface, they lit the room with their flickers. Fancy people wearing cocktail dresses and dark suits stood around talking, smoking, and drinking in the ethereal, dim glow. By the mantel, my maternal and paternal grandfathers were deep in conversation. My mother's father, Goodwin J. Knight, whom we called Papa, was the former Republican governor of California. He left his office in 1959. Cal, my paternal grandfather, was a boxing promoter at the Olympic Auditorium in downtown Los Angeles. Papa's presence was a must at these soirees, not so much because he was family. Your father likes to surround himself with important people, Mom said. It makes him feel like a big man. Meanwhile, Josephine was in the kitchen heating up the cheese puffs. Winter or summer, tiki torches or roaring fires, there would always be cocktails and cheese puffs. I was 8 and 30 pounds overweight. Those puffs were my favorite. Mom, who counted her calories to stay thin, had recently begun monitoring my food. Having a fat daughter didn't fly with her. My sister April, 5 years older, balked whenever Mom handed me cookies and treats to shut me up. Dinner at these parties was dished up, buffet style, in large silver chafing dishes, usually beef stroganoff or turkey tetrazzini. The main course always covered a heap of thick egg noodles. Parties were the only time our house smelled like a home. Papa, holding court in the corner, didn't trust my father, even though it was Papa himself who was responsible for my parents getting together in the first place. When he'd been lieutenant governor, he disapproved of my mother's desire to become an actress and wanted her to settle down, so he set her up with Cal's son. Mom and Dad's first date had been a middleweight boxing match, surrounded by other well-dressed spectators in front row seats. They met in April, were engaged in July, and married 5 months later. Just before the wedding day, Mom's teenage sister Carolyn provoked Mom, teasing her about being a blushing bride. Just as my mother lifted a hand to playfully hit her, Carolyn jumped out of the way. Instead of hitting Carolyn, Mom hit one of the glass panes in the French windows leading to the backyard. Mom walked down the aisle 2 days later with a plaster cast on her right arm, covered up with a cascade of white spray roses. I should have known then, Mom would say later. 8 years after the wedding, Papa suspected that my father was cheating and hired a private investigator. Dad stayed out too many late nights, always with flimsy excuses. When Papa confronted Mom with the photographs of Dad at Perino's with different women, proof that Dad had had other women, she was 8 months pregnant with me. At first, Mom kicked Dad out, but a month later, just before I was born, she took him back. What the hell else was I going to do? She told Papa. As I crouched behind the plastic foliage, Dad refilled his J&B from the bar in the butler's pantry. Bob, I'll get you a drink. My mother followed him, nervously fluffing hair. I don't know where the damn serving girl is. My father turned and planted a perfunctory kiss on her lips. His hazel eyes held her gaze. You just keep the party going, Marilyn. You're good at that. After April and I changed into our special night clothes, we wore only for these party nights, we made our way down the carpeted front stairway for the entrance Mom had choreographed. Look, look, Mom called out. It's Heather and April come to say goodnight before we eat. Somewhere in the crowd, I heard one of the men say, screw the food, let's just keep drinking. We positioned ourselves on the second step to be seen by the guests. Good night, everyone, we said in unison. Mom had a cardinal rule. Kids and cocktails don't mix. Thank you. Well, that's just a little bit of chapter 1. I hope you got a tiny glimpse into the characters, the time, how things felt and looked to me at that age. It was amazing to go back as I wrote this. People say, how do you remember all these details? And I do, I really remembered them. And I would go back in my head and I could be there now. I could be in that living room and smell those smells and hear those voices. And so it really was not difficult to go back there in my mind. But aside from that, I do want to touch on just writing a memoir and what it's like to write a memoir and to expose yourself to everyone. When I laugh when I tease that my life's an open book, it kind of is now, but to write a memoir is a very scary thing to do. It's opening up yourself. And when I was writing this book, it started out as not as a memoir. It was really about it started out actually about the house. I was going to write about the house as a character. And then it turned into more about my mother. And as I was writing it, I realized that the book was really more about me. And I got there actually through my mentor, Bernadette, who kept saying, Heather, you're not going deep enough. You're not going there. And I'd say, I'm deep. But I did. And I'm so glad I did go deeper. And it was much more cathartic to write my story, where I'd written so many essays about my mother. People love her as a character. I mean, a writer doesn't get a character like my mother. And her essays sold. I mean, people couldn't get enough Marilyn. So I thought that would be the key to my book. But I'm so glad I wrote my story because while I was doing it, I did think to myself, who would care? I am nobody, meaning no, I'm not famous, and I have not, certainly when you read the book, you see I've had challenges, really difficult challenges, but I always thought, oh heck, there are so many other people who had many more challenges than I have, yet something propelled me to write this book. And what I learned later after people read it is that people really resonated with it, of all ages, cultures, every genders, everybody. And I was just telling you, Christine, that I received last weekend a letter from a woman that it really touched me. And young friends of my children's that they would read it and would tell me their stories and how they looked at our family and when our children were growing up. So I'm really glad that I did it. And yet, while I was writing it. No one had read it at all except for Bernadette and my mentor, and not even my husband or children. Uh, I also had an editor in New York who had helped me out as well. But the only person who'd really read the book was my mother when she was alive. She was fabulous. She was nearing the end of her life and not in good health. And I started writing this book, and she would, tell me, okay, when you get to finish your first chapter, just read it to me. So that's how it started. And I started, reading the chapters to her, and she'd say to me, okay, hurry up with the next chapter. I need to know what happens. I go, Mom, you do know what happens. But it was very, very good for us. Also, when obviously there's some very, very challenging parts in the book. And she'd say, oh gosh, I was that bad, Heather. I'm so sorry. And we'd have a good laugh, actually. And it was really, I mean, who gets that? I mean, a lot of people don't get to have that with a parent who perhaps neglected you, or she always said, I did the best I could. And I think she really did. But it was, she was the only one who really had, I would read it to. And she was extremely helpful because she remembered all of these little nuances that I didn't remember, like, Al Jolson singing at her wedding, her first wedding, she had great one-liners. And each chapter begins with one of her one-liners. And it really sets the tone for the chapter. And I never changed that through all the editing processes. It was so perfect. And so she was very spot on. And so those would be the perfect intro to the chapter. But in writing it, again, it was a solo thing for me. And then when I finished my very first draft, a long, long time ago, I let our children and my husband read it. And it was, it was interesting. My husband, of course, had known the story, but my children were really kind of blown away because I really hadn't ever sat down and said, well, let me just tell you. So it meant a lot to me when they gave me the okay for the book, and that they supported me and were very moved by the story. And it really helped a lot. And I hope someday my granddaughters, I have 3 granddaughters right now, I hope that they read it and learn about their grandmother and their great grandmother. But aside from all that, when you write a memoir, it is very scary because you're writing about people, and their lives are, their own lives and private, and everybody has a different way of looking things. And my family knew I was writing it. My sister April and my cousin Jonathan knew I was writing this. And my sister April never, ever asked to read any part of the book. She would help me with little details because she had worked for my stepfather. I needed some things about the divorce or whatever, and she was extremely helpful with that. But she never asked to read the book, and I never offered to give it to her. And just thinking, okay, this is fine. This will work. And same with Jonathan. And when I was published and I got the contract, I was really scared. And I thought, my God, what am I doing? I'm signing my life away here, literally. And I went ahead and did it. And then when I got my ARCs, which are the advanced review copies, I was that really, if there's anything like a panic attack, I think that's when I had one. I remember, you get these pictures of people opening up the box and all the paper flying and how excited they are. Not me. I thought, oh my gosh, here I am. These words are all on the page and there's no going back now. And I was terrified. And so 2 days later, that night I called my sister and she said, Heather, stop worrying. And 2 days later, I gave her the book to read. And she called me the next morning. She'd read it that night. And she just said, Heather, it's fabulous. And that meant everything to me. And I asked her why, she'd never asked to read any earlier versions. And she said, because if I had done that, I was just so strong and so opinionated, and I saw my world so clearly, I would have influenced you and it wouldn't have been your story. And I have to tell you, what a gift. As a memoirist, as someone who writes their story, that's a gift. Um, and my cousin Jonathan, he was wonderful. He called me after he read it and he said he'd cried because I was worried. I'd written about his mother. Um, and yet he was extremely supportive. So I'm very, very fortunate. Uh, there are, however, names in the book that I did change. People who have not passed away, who I just thought it would be more prudent to change their names, which I did. And sometimes when people come up to me and say, well, so and so, I think, who? Oh, yes, that's right. I even kept a list on my desk. It's like, okay, who's who going on here? And actually, that's a fun part. I remember I said to Bernadette, well, how do I do this? And she said, well, start Googling names in like 1962. And I'd sit there and go, okay. So that was fun, but I did do that. And for me, that was comfortable because I was not out to, you know, badmouth people. I was just telling my story. So anyway, again, I am glad I did it. And I am so moved by people who tell me their stories and what it means to me to hear them say, "Oh, thank you for telling yours." I I think once one opens up and talks about maybe things that went on in their lives that they've never shared before, other people feel, well, they're not alone, that their challenges have not been unique. And if I have had any help in that, that feels great. Um, and even, you never know, my neighbor around the block, who knew, he's a doctor, and he said, Heather, I loved your book. I was a fat kid. I thought, oh my gosh, all this things come out all over the place. They tell you everything. So anyway, so I'm happy to take questions from anyone if they have any questions about what it was like to write it, what it was like to go back to that era. Um, how I feel about it now. Um, I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you so much, Heather, for a wonderful presentation and for reading the first chapter and giving us a set feeling of your book and what it's about, and letting us glimpse into your life and the challenges that you've had and how you've been able to express them and on the page, and just give us a glimpse of that history of that period. So what was it like going to Larchmont Boulevard? Very exciting in those eras. They had Jurgensen's that we had in
Oh,
Pasadena.
the sandwich. I
And
can't remember what chapter that was in, but I write about the turkey sandwich that anyone who went to Jurgensen's knows about.
yeah, we had one in Pasadena. In fact, there used to be one up in Linda Vista
Right.
a good 35 years ago. It's now where the fire station is. And then that you talk about Vandy camps. We used to all go to Vandy camps. You could still get Vandy camps in the markets, especially at different times, sweet rolls. So it was very, very special. So you set a lot of place and gave a lot of history of that period of time and what it was like to live there during that time. So, and that's what you had a clear memory of, or did you actually go through and read some books that would help you set the scene? Or
You know, not really. I didn't. I was stuck in one part of the book, and I read another book about a home, about a family home, and it was in Massachusetts. But I needed to read about somebody else and their home, and it got me from one place to another. That was the only real book that that I read or thought about with the era. I did thank heaven for the internet. I don't know how writers did it back in the day, but I would go back to, I could go back to, Scandia or the menu at the entree cafeteria or the booths
Sure.
that would spark my memory. But today I can still sit there in that booth with my grandfather pouring, ketchup in a spoon. Um, it became very easy for me, and I don't know really why, because I can't remember a phone number or things I did yesterday. But I think someone once said that when memories are tied with emotion, they are very keen, and I think that's perhaps what happened to me.
Oh, that's very interesting. Memories tied with emotions.
Mhm.
That's very, very true. Very true. Remember those. So, what surprised you the most about having published this memoir? Once you were nervous about your family reading it and your sister and cousin, and
Um, I I guess I was surprised and extremely grateful for the support of my family, but not really surprised. I I felt that they I was very surprised that they really accepted my work, and that they not only accepted it but supported it and promoted it, which is pretty wonderful. And like, oh, I had my two stepbrothers, three, four. I have a lot of them. They wrote me beautiful, beautiful notes, and they've been incredible, incredible, and that brings me back. So definitely,
oh, that's nice. So, each of your chapters starts with a saying that your
yes,
mother said. So,
yes.
these are sayings you remember, or you really could maybe read your book somewhat like little segments. So, you wrote it in segments or in periods of time.
Well, actually, the book started out in three parts: part one, two, and three, and um, then I decided to bring it all together, and I don't remember why or how, but I did, and it was smoother, um, and it ran clearer than when I chopped it all up. But as far as my mother's sayings, I have 165 written down. I have a file of Marilyn sayings. It's unbelievable. She was spot on. It was, you could, that's why I wish you were here in COVID, because she would have some fabulous saying about all that we're going through, and it would be spot on.
Oh, so
Yeah.
your mother was quite a character.
Yes.
So were you tempted to soften her in order to kind of protect her feelings, or and then she enjoyed you read the chapter with
Oh,
her,
yeah.
chapter, and it wasn't maybe as
Oh,
happy
no,
as she
I
thought
did.
as she, you know,
My
thought it might be
mother,
a little worrisome to her.
my mother was very tough. Um, but she was, uh, she always, if she'd say, "Oh, a cat's a better mother," she would joke about things that she goes, "Oh, you should have had the mother with the bun on the back of the head and the cross around the neck and the Peter Pan collar." I'm not that, She was very sparkly, very flamboyant, as you can see in this picture I have of her. This is nothing. She had eyelashes and long nails when nobody had them. And she actually wore, on her second husband, she wore the eyelashes on a camping trip, and the bears, he said that the bears came out and looked at her and freaked. They had never seen eyelashes on a woman like that. No writer gets a character like my mother. I mean, she's unbelievable. But I didn't really, I'm trying to think if I softened her. Not really. Um, she did not know my last chapter because she was really not well when I wrote it. But she probably would have laughed along with me, at what happened. It was just, I won't disclose it now, but the readers, it's just so typical of my mother, what happened in the end. But she was very honest and forthright. And if I said something to her, she'd go, okay, all right. You kind of almost couldn't hurt her. She was just so tough.
Well, I do encourage everyone to read your last chapter of the book, because she's finally very, very happy in
Yes.
that
It's
last chapter.
Yes, it's
That
a
one.
happy ending. It's a happy ending. I always tell people that, because I had one friend that said, "Oh, I can't, I couldn't read this." I said, "Wait, give it a chance. It ends up good. So you'll be fine."
So what recommendations would you give to someone that wants to write a memoir? Because it's a hard thing to do. It's not an easy
Um,
type of book to write.
well, um, what would I say? Well, here's one thing. I kept a journal and a diary all my life. I started at 8, and I write about this in the book. I've always loved to write, and that really helped me with my book, because I had so much material already. Um, and I, I think you have to really want to do it. You have to really be ready to share yourself, and you need someone in your life who is like I had with Bernadette, someone who is going to take you way farther than you think you can go, because a really good memoir tells the truth, and a reader knows. It's just they're raw, and sometimes I think that's hard to do by yourself. You think you're fine, but someone who is not, you know, married to you or your child or your mother or sister, can maybe recognize that as what happened with me. Um, and I think you have to be willing to go there, as they say, as Katie Couric said in her book, her memoir that just came out, because, people are going to criticize you. Oftentimes I'll think, why do I do this? Why do I put myself out there? Why can't I just be quiet and live my life? But then, if one feels that their story may help or resonate or just open up someone else's life, then it should be written.
Well, it's definitely a very nice story, a very good story, a very insightful story. And thank you for sharing it with us. Someone wants to know, is there anything you deleted that you wish you had left in? Or do you have a sequel? Do you have a sequel maybe?
Oh, sequel. Oh,
Sequel.
no, there really isn't. I actually really miss writing this book. I loved it. It was something, and I had a project, and no matter what happened in my life, nothing could take my book away. I wrote every day. I'd start at 1:30 in the afternoon, and I miss that. I miss that dedication that I had. I don't know where the discipline went, but it was wonderful, because now I'm working on an essay and it's a nightmare. But at that time, having that project, it just kept me moving forward. And I could do it anywhere, on an airplane, which, by the way, is the best place to write. No one can interrupt you. And I had to travel a lot on business with my husband. So I thought, gosh, if I could just build a little seat in my house with a little window and have a seat belt, I could write 4 books in a month. It's just, you're tight in that little thing. So I missed the project, and I would love to do another project. And I have a few things in my head. I don't know if I could do a sequel. Marilyn she's passed, and I think I just have a feeling up there, she's pretty happy with with what I did and how it turned out. So I don't know if I could top that, but certainly I would love to have another project. Definitely.
Well, I'm sure you will find one. I'm sure you will. Something all of a sudden will come to you. But just think about, if it was a movie, who would you want to play your mother?
People have asked me that. I think, gosh, that's a hard one, because she's so 50s. Oh, golly. Well, like a Lady Gaga, you know, she's flamboyant. People say Reese Witherspoon. Um, oh golly, I wouldn't know. Uh, yeah, I would think like a Lady Gaga with lots of eyelashes and lips and hair going and wild outfits with sparkles. You know, she lived life, boy, I'll tell you.
She enjoyed every minute of it.
She did.
Well, almost every
Given the
minute.
hard times, yeah, yeah, yes,
Well, in the hard times, she kept herself going. She was
yes,
extremely resilient, so she taught you how to be very resilient. And so you say you have 156, was that it?
yes,
Sayings from your mother, which
yes.
are quite spectacular. Oh, and then one of them, I'm reading these different ones, out of the nowhere and into the now.
Right. That was a good one. That she's got, I mean, they never cease. Oh gosh, well, kids and cocktails don't mix. That's a starter. And I'll actually tell you how I got the title. That was not the original title. The original title was Behind the Gates, which just seemed natural about Fremont. And my publisher came back to me and said, well, guess what? Someone's already got that. It was actually a Michael Jackson book or something. It was very different. So he said, you know, we have to give you a new title and you have two choices. What do you want? And I thought, oh my gosh. So one was Kids and Cocktails Don't Mix. And the other one was Heather Bean, which was the name, my nickname as a child. And they took the two names to a focus group and 100% voted on Kids and Cocktails Don't Mix, which worried me because I thought it would be related to alcohol. And that, believe me, there are a lot of drunk situations in this book, but that really wasn't my story. But I guess, the title being what it is, a lot of people have said to me that they didn't even think that when they, started the book, that it wasn't to them, it was an alcohol related type book.
So someone wants to know that you write so many blogs, and your blogs are excellent. Your stories in there are quite fascinating. I've enjoyed them, but would you maybe put them together as a book?
Well, it's funny you mentioned that. The other thing I thought of doing is a collection of essays that I've written about my mother, that the stories are unbelievable. And I do miss that. I can't tell you how many times I would get in the car after being with her and I couldn't write fast enough. I couldn't get home fast enough to get the hands on the laptop and write it out, because they were just unbelievable stories and things that happened in her life and how she turned in, no matter what situation, she could turn it into many times positive, no matter how dire it seemed. I mean, for one example, she had to go to the emergency room when she was in the assisted living. And she was so excited because all of the paramedics that came were so handsome and sexy. So she thought it was so much fun to ride in, have all these handsome hunks, you call, lift her up on a gurney and take her, to the emergency room. And I thought, now who's that? I mean, she's thrilled to death. She goes, look at these bodies. I'm like, oh my God, that was her. That was her. So I've got so many, and that is a thought, definitely.
Yeah, she's in her late 80s or at that time when she's living in the nursing home.
Yes.
Yeah.
She got a tattoo at 85, and that was always, something to talk about. And anytime she'd go to the doctor or anywhere, she'd show them her tattoo. It was on her ankle, thank heavens. But she'd always wanted one all her life. And so she's a happening, as she would say, definitely.
Happening, yes. So here's one of the sayings at the beginning of the chapter: you can stand anything as long as it's only temporary.
Yes.
So that's really how she got through a lot of things, and just, yes, quite a courageous woman. And so I'm sure you follow her as well.
Oh, thank you. But
I'm sure you do.
oh, thank you. That line is really good. I've thought of it a lot through COVID. You know, well, I don't know, it's temporary, but it keeps going on and on.
Right,
But
right.
I think about that a lot.
Right. And then the Entre Cafe is God's waiting room. Everyone is there is old and on the launching pad.
Right, right. And it was, but my grandfather loved it. So that's where we would go. And it was definitely, oh boy, definitely.
So you have these wonderful memories. And so do you take your granddaughters? Are some of these places still in existence?
No, they're not. And it's funny. I just started taking my little 2.5-year-old granddaughter out to that. She loves this little cafe. They live in Las Vegas. And I think about that. When I'm with her, I think, oh, what will she think when she grows up? But I will certainly try to do that with them. Our own new little places, but it's just a different world now. And those places are so, I think back to, the leather booths and the cloth tablecloths and the hushed plates on the tables, and it was just a different era. Lots of cocktails.
Right, right. And Los Angeles certainly has changed in that whole
Gosh,
general area. In that
definitely.
area. So somebody is saying that they think your mother reminds them of Auntie Mame.
Definitely. Yes. 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 She was like, oh, what was Anna Mae's line? Oh, there's a line. My sister has it. She always repeats it. That reminds us of our mother. Very true. Very
Well,
true.
thank you so much, Heather, for sharing your memoir with us, for sharing it this evening with everyone that's attended today and getting to know you better, and the fact that you were just able to write a memoir. That's a wonderful thing to be able to do. I think there's one last question. Do you see your mother's spunk? Was your mother's spunk in your daughters or your granddaughters? You certainly have your mother's spunk.
Oh,
That we know. But you see that in a 2.5-year-old granddaughter already?
yes, she's Grace. She's very lovely, and she's not my mother. She's very gracious, like her name, and more reserved. Our second granddaughter, India, we tease that she is like my mother. She loves people. She goes and touches everybody. And she was visiting here a few weeks ago and was on the driveway, and the little boy next door is 2 years old, and he was out front, and she ran over to go meet him. I thought, oh my God, there she is my mother after a man. My mother always wanted a man. So that there's India after the man. But she's very gregarious and outgoing. She's going to give my daughter a run for her money. So I think, oh boy, Hillary, good luck with that one. But and our Amelia, our youngest, I don't know what she'll be like, but I do see my mother in the middle one, definitely. Definitely.
Well, that's nice that you have those wonderful memories. You have the memories and you've been able to write it down and share it with us this evening. And so I encourage everyone to check out a copy of Cocktails. What is it again? It's Cocktails, Kids and Cocktails Don't Mix. To check out a copy of Kids and Cocktails Don't Mix from your Pasadena library, or purchase a copy yourself at Roman's Bookstore. So there's a couple more messages. I don't think anybody wants you to leave. They've enjoyed your program so much, Heather. Let's see now. Okay, let me get the last two questions. Whether you wanted to see your mother, it's a great program, and they wanted to thank you very much, and they want to thank you. It was a fabulous program, and thank you very, very much, Heather, for being with us this evening.
Christine, it was such an honor, and I just want to thank everyone for tuning in and for supporting the Pasadena Public Library, which is pretty incredible. So I am just so honored to be here, and I thank you so much.
Well, thank you too, Heather. We're very honored to have had you join and be part of Authors and Their Journeys. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So, good night, everyone. Thank you.